One thing you are absolutely going to learn about me, I hate eclipse energy. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. There is a reason in India why they will shut down majority of the temples during eclipse season. Nothing good comes from it. There's a reason we tell you to mind your business, not communicate with anyone. Don't you find it funny? A lot of the remedy for eclipse energy is literally keeping to yourself and fasting. There is a reason for that. Even the most spiritual, tantric motherfuckers on this planet, only even out of them, a few can handle eclipse energy and do sadhana for very specific purposes that will enhance their spiritual journey. For the rest of us hibiscuses, shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up, mind your business. It's a lost talent and skill. Also, if you think of the dynamics of Rahu and Ketu, which essentially make up the karmic axes, is a time of fate. Have you ever heard the phrase, don't tempt fate? Do you see where we're heading? Following on from that point, traditionally, I don't actually talk about eclipses. I am not a big fan of Starbucks spirituality and the theatrics and the drama because they give us nothing while simultaneously trying to act like they're giving us everything. However,
and this is quite embarrassing. I'm going to have to contradict myself.
So as you know, astrologically, we are in a period of rebirth, and it just happens to be at the time of me and you doing whatever this is. Yeah, so it turns out these eclipses are huge catalysts for the next 7 years, which I think it's time to probably have a conversation from 2025 to 2032. Oh, honey, the cosmic hitting the fan. I mean, you've heard about P. Diddy and the 1,000 bottles of baby oil. We're just getting warmed up. That was the opening of what's to come. And these particular eclipses,
this really does go against my normal style because I hate the theatrics, I hate the drama, but it's
probably a good time to talk to you about ancestral karma, ancestral curses, and like burning through a lot of karma, because these eclipses are alluding to something much bigger. So grab a cup of cha, get comfortable, and let's have our first public awooga wooga conversation. God, I hate these. This is so embarrassing. But yeah, get comfortable. Let me Right, so the first cosmic red flag that I had these eclipses was something a little bit different out of the ordinary, was actually the timings of these eclipses. So they are happening during Pitru Paksha. So this happens every year. There are 16 days in the year where we will very much intentionally do ancestral worship, and it is such an integral part of our practices. So as you know, one thing I teach a lot about is your karmas. It doesn't matter if you're the same sign or the same placements as one another, you carry completely different karmas. And one of the biggest ones tends to be ancestral karma. And when we look at your charts and we put all different 20 birth charts together, we can very quickly work out what ancestral karmas you carry. So, you know, when you have issues getting married, conceiving children, financial stability, perhaps there is an issue with addictive personality, addictive behaviors that plagues the household, right? You're talking about generational behavioral patterns that keep harming the bloodline and causing disruptions, all that kind of stuff. This is due to ancestral karmas, and they can always be identified in your charts. So the act of ancestral worship is not just one of something of respect and dignity and staying connected to your roots. Low key, it's one of necessity. I tend to keep a lot of this chat offline because I don't feel comfortable talking about the wooga wooga, probably outside of Patreon or into one-to-one conversations when I do readings. Just because, again, I teach about colonialism, and one thing I've always found so deeply insensitive, offensive, and just like I want to smack the taste out of these salt and pepper mouths is like all the clownery they do around ancestral worship. But I think the moment calls for it, so let's break this down properly. I want to be clear, when you are discussing the whole kind of exercise of ancestral worship, it is not just about these dramatic rituals and the mockery style that spirituality makes of different cultures and their ways of, I would say, giving respect to their ancestors. It is a very conscious exercise to understand how our present day is absolutely a product of things that have come before us. And listen, you know, when we talk about racism, sexism, xenophobia, immigrant trauma, so many things that disturb our ability to have stable lives, to feel good in ourselves, that has links to our ancestors. So it's a really, I think, a very sensitive way of acknowledging how our ancestral karma very much affects our daily lives. And we can see that in your horoscopes, right? When we break down and we have certain conversations with you, whether it's stuff around fertility, finances, happiness, like there's a lot. So usually during Pitru Paksha, during these days, it's very much just about an intentional time where you will do certain exercises, you will do certain mantras. And I'm going to keep this very high level and superficial just because I think I'm finding my comfort level in regards to certain stuff, and I hate this idea of me sharing stuff and it getting exploited, or some sort of like Starbucks spirituality taking it and like using it and weaponizing it against people. But essentially, long story short, when you have certain yogas in your chart and dosha, so those are different energy combinations that for us as Vedic astrologers will very clearly explain why you have certain hardships, blockages and delays in your life. This is the correct or most abundant and useful time to do certain exercises that can ease that ancestral karma that is infecting your daily life, to put it simply. Consider it like this: ancestral karmas is like an invisible hand, right? And it shapes and contributes to the destiny that unfolds for the individual and the generations ahead of it. Whether that's you have certain talents and gifts, which I hope is the case for everybody else, but you know, in the everyday, it is the most quickest way to identify what are the blockages for that bloodline, what is going on here, what is holding someone back. So when you talk about ancestral karma, it's a very sensitive thing, and it's a thing that runs deep, and it's highly emotional. So the time of Pitru Paksha has always been one of, I think it begins with introspection, understanding, and most importantly, giving respect and dues where dues are meant to be given for what has allowed us to have the life that we do have. And also, on a more sensitive note, probably begin brainstorming and unpacking ways to get out of cycles that have kept us back in our group, in our bloodline, right? You have to remember, not everybody leaves this world on a good note. Not everybody fulfills their ambitions, their desires, that like the Atmakaraka is not always, that note is not always hit. This has deep implications, right? And I want to go a little bit outside of just kind of the traditional concepts of when you think of like biological parents. For me, listen, I've been reading for over 15 years. I have seen and heard a lot. Even if someone is adopted, or I personally think, because I read for a lot of like trans and queer people build chosen families. I 100% think just the same way we say daughters and sons are destined to the parents. Do you know there's a concept in Vedic astrology from one of the schools where they think the soul intentionally picks its parents, right? It wants them. The same absolutely applies to people. in those kind of chosen family dynamics. It's predestined you guys would come together. So when you look at ancestral karma, it's complex, it's messy, often a highly sensitive subject. But these 16 days, yeah, I think it's a nice time to do spiritual gym work in terms of like work through, learn how to hold certain weight that was difficult with a lot more ease, and if needs be, learn to put down weight that like you are not capable of holding and pushing just yet. So the fact that the eclipses will be happening during this time, it essentially will heighten a lot of intense family issues and dynamics with authority and stuff like that. It's not an easy time. So whilst I am not one for fanning the flames of drama and stuff, but spirituality, yeah, this particular window, it comes with a heavier hit hibiscuses. It really does. And I want to echo a message that I've been drop feeding through my different social media platforms. From October 2023 until May 2025, the decisions we make will deeply impact the generations ahead of us. And I'm talking many decades and generations ahead of us. And I personally believe, again, not trying to be too a wooga wooga, but yeah, I have a heavy feeling our ancestors, whatever their unfinished business are, or whatever their will is and their influences, it's deeply gonna be impacting the road ahead for so many different communities, for so many different cultures. That's why when I did the Instagram post, I labeled it like ancestral awakening and curses, because when it comes alive, it's not just a case of oh my god, all of a sudden like I'm psychic, I'm a Vedic astrologer, and like it's not that. What it will be in practice is the following. Let's do a really positive one, right? Maybe you belong to a family that has a family business, right? And it's been plodding along, but it really hasn't lived up to its true potential. And perhaps, you know, you may come from a lineage of people that had many ambitions and desires, but you know, we do live in a complicated world. We are victims of colonizations. We are living under fascism, oppression, so many different layers of discrimination. It's not just so as easy to say, these are your talents and skills, achieve them. But one thing we should never underestimate is each generation always gets a little bit closer. It always slowly accounts. But this can be a time where something about these eclipses, and you have to remember, eclipse energy doesn't just happen in that time frame of one eclipse happening and the other eclipse closing it. No, it's a month after month process. It lingers for a while, right? Something from this moment onwards will give you the inspiration, the education, and then that family business that was plodding along,
You billionaires.
no, but you get the point, right? Like, you pick it up, you change it, you adapt it, you bring in the fruits that always due, you know? Or perhaps there is a lost dream or unfulfilled ambition in the bloodline, and it comes back to life through you somehow, some way, and it's fulfilled. That's the nice part of this, right? Then we have the latter, and again, it's not lost on me that we are in a Saturn ruled year. Saturn itself in our religious texts is a rejected child. I have seen this through my own readings since 2023, and I have no doubt I will be seeing more of it in the coming years. But I know many of you are going through very complicated, unsafe, tough family dynamics. And it's come to a boiling point, right? There's a lot of shit coming out there. There is a lot, right? Yeah, this is a time where it will come to an ugly head. But it's not, I'll give you a few ways to look at it, right? It's not just a case of we're done here, conflict, running a mouth. No. It's a time of resolution. So maybe number one is you properly acknowledge what that behavior, perception, and pattern is, if you can't resolve it internally, you just will not carry this forward when you have your own dynamic, or you won't carry this belief into the world as an individual, as an adult. Number 2, hopefully it's time of healing. You know, I think one thing I've always found so ridiculous about Starbucks spirituality and things it preaches, it makes people scared of arguments and conflicts. Now, it might be my bias because I am a hot-headed Punjabi, but conflict isn't necessarily bad, but it's the way you handle it. And conflict can often be a really good medium in terms of seeing other sides of perspectives and getting through the nastiness. Remember, Rahu's in Uttapadra. It's a lotus flower that blooms from the dirtiest, thickest, darkest waters, but it still pushes through. So yeah, maybe not in the most uncomfortable conversations or situations, but some healing is brought because you acknowledge perhaps the ancestral role, or that thing that hasn't quite stopped playing the bloodline. And then I think thirdly, and probably more on a somber note, you're wrapping it up. Some things cannot be carried on, some relationships cannot stay, and there's just a lot of clarity given, and that's where I think the more painful realizations come through. And I hope that isn't the case for many of you, but it will be the case for, I think, a fair few of you. So connecting the dots is, okay, these eclipses are happening at a time where traditionally we would be doing ancestral worship. Now you understand the implications on why we do ancestral worship. What the icing on this freaky cosmic cake is at this particular time is when Rahu goes through the 9 types of Pisces and Ketu makes its way through the 9 types of Virgo, it specifically denotes a time where the soul has to face the consequences of the life it has chosen to lead, and it kind of sits in this state of stillness as it faces the consequences. Because again, for us, Rahu works backwards, right? But when Rahu's going through the process of Taurus, Aries, Pisces, that essentially is a process of death, going through the process of death, rebirth, and then you're put in the new life. And then Ketu in Virgo, so if it goes from Scorpio to Libra to Virgo, it's like a process of accountability and destruction. So that's what makes the timing so freakish, because by default we are in a period of astrological rebirth. It talks about being put on the path to a new life, but a part of that process is you face all the consequences. And I think maybe it's worth saying, like, when you look at dharmic faiths and our outlooks and our religious beliefs, you often hear something called the law of karma. And I've always found that terminology so interesting because, you know, with Abrahamic faiths, right? The whole point in Islam of doing dua, and in Christianity to do like confessions, and in Judaism, there's always this idea of forgiveness and penance. Whereas in dharmic faiths, when you say something's a law, it's like a default setting. Once you do it, you answer it, right? There is no, and it's not an idea of punishment, but it is what it is. Everything will get the same response. So for us, I think sometimes it's good on a level of accountability, but then it does bring up theological questions of like, well, what happens if it was my first time fuck up? Was the consequence as intense as the behavior that I was exuding? It can bring up a lot of messiness in that, right? But essentially, yeah, I think it's interesting that when we've come back to this kind of restarting point that happens every other decade, that during that time when we're going through that kind of energy, it would fall in a time of ancestral worship. and then you have to start connecting the dots. So that's why I felt like with these particular eclipses, because I will not talk to you guys every eclipse. Maybe for the next couple of ones I will until 2032, because a lot's about to go down. But it's guided by the ancestors. I think there's a lot of emotional things that have to be talked about, but they have to be done in a way that's respectful. And also, I'm not a big fan of cry baby energy, and I'm always very conscious of like people weaponizing spirituality to enable harmful behaviors and find excuses for basically their shittiness. Like, I'm not doing that here. So my whole thing is here, whatever insights you get, take them seriously and think about what has enabled those insights to occur or those situations to unfold. What does it mean for you? What do you want to change moving forward? And handle everything gracefully and respectfully, but make sure you don't make any final decisions until a little bit later on this year, just because with eclipses, they are deceptive. So this is a time where you'll get like unexpected information, or God will give you whatever truth you were meant to have, but as to date, it will not be the full picture. So that's why the whole thing of like ancestral awakenings and curses are really prevalent, because the things that happen at this time are a result of ancestral karmas for each of you. And only you will know what that is and what your bloodline's been up to. But yeah, that's the first freaky part over. We should also probably move on to how this stuff is a tantric eclipse. So this is where things get, I think, very interesting and awooga wooga. So the whole thing is, the thing that makes this a tantric eclipse is because what the planets are doing before the eclipses occur. So usually when you have the moon moving very closely to Saturn, it's a time of emotional disturbances. But we always have to acknowledge Saturn carries an element of karma and fate too. So whilst it is not an easy time for anybody, there's like so much emphasis on like transformation, fate, like all this wildness, craziness, and I think it's fair to say like emotional distress was destined to happen. But it's through that disturbances transformation can occur, and that's a tantric element, right? It's about a deep personal transformation, one that allows you to shed things that are not healthy, things that are not allowing you to go through the process of self-realization, things that keep you caught up in the cycle of Maya and make you a victim of Maya. Basically, it's like a cosmic recycling moment where you get the chance to kind of put out the different clutter to the bins, and your house spiritually should become a little bit lighter. But it's kind of like, the rubbish is about to be taken out, but you got last minute notice. So there's a lot of drama around it. Whilst this process will be emotionally very messy, and you're definitely going to face emotional upheavals, there will be some financial shakeups, and yeah, if you haven't picked up a lot of family drama, just consider it the tantric process of transformation. So do me a favor, go and watch my video about Rahu going through Uttarapadra, because it gives you that level of, it's a lotus flower pushing through the mud and darkness. So what I'm trying to get at, usually I tell people to mind their business during eclipse. It's not actually a crazy time, it's just a time where you're going to feel out of sorts, but there's a reason we tell you to keep out and keep to yourself. That is just not the case for these eclipses. They are the ending of endings and the beginnings of beginnings. They're really fucking serious. And this is not my style to fearmonger and A, B, and C. And I am fully aware when you are watching this, whatever unfolds during these eclipses, or definitely by the end of this year, as the eclipse energy, it's not going to be fun. It will be disappointing. It will be distressing. But it also will be correct. And look at it like this. Sometimes I think you have to see things on a spectrum. So on my Patreon, I always use like the girly pop thing of like, if you've been a good person, here's Powerpuff Girls. If you've been a naughty person, here's the Mojo Jojo, right? And these will be your experiences during these transits. But let me apply the same lens so you understand where the good can come from. And then, yeah, if you are feeling the weight of the naughtiness, why you would be feeling that way. So let's just start with you have always tried your best to be a peacemaker. You come with good intentions, but really you're being taken advantage of, right? The feeling is not mutual, and perhaps you were not even aware of how you were being exploited in certain dynamics. And again, I'm being really sensitive because I know this is most likely going to apply to a lot of your home dynamics. Do you think it is not better to become aware of the realities of the home environment and the things that are going on in the company you are keeping in A, B, and C than to keep you in ignorance and delusions and all of that essentially are holding you back, are harming you, or like they're really not respectful. So again, when you see the chaos through that lens, it's liberating you, it's helping you. And I think also it's opening up room for you to turn into like the person you were meant to be. And I appreciate these are probably not the circumstances you would like to go through that process with, but it's necessary because God, do you know that quote we see so much online, like God sees the things that we do not, God hears the conversations we do not. And I always say to people, and I try to emphasize this as much as possible, especially when people are going through like very distressful times, you get everything that happens to you at a time where God knows you can fundamentally handle it. You are built for that moment. You only do yourself a disservice when you start acting out of sorts and like, oh my God, like, no. You know, we talk a lot about, for us, creation and destruction are one of the same thing, and we don't really see good versus evil the way you would see in Abrahamic religions. Like, it's all one energy, but that's where free will comes into it. And the way someone controls their perception will greatly change the happiness in their experiences. And it's not that the dramas and the obstacles and the challenges become less frequent. No, you just build up to a certain point where you understand the nature of beast, of being in existence with humanity. And I think you end up understanding the ebbs of flow in life, and everything has its purpose. There's some complexities around here emotionally that I fully understand, that like you're probably going to want to spend time like, why would they do like you're going to be going through like the mental math, right? Whilst you must absolutely process your feelings and they're all valid, please don't spend too much time on them or driving yourself insane, because so much good is coming that why would you drain that energy away from building the stuff that's going to be like the most blissful and the most deserving of you. Now for my Mojo Jojo babes, because I'm aware not everyone's good intentions, people be messy, you can lie to yourself but you will not be lying to me. Like, I see who you are in your charts. Now for the naysayers, I'm joking, could you imagine? PDD is an excellent example of what's unfolding during this eclipse, FYI, and so are the wider team that's getting arrested for contributing to the unaliving of the doctor in Kolkata. Oh, I come with the receipts. But let me just wrap it up when it comes to the Mojo Jojos of the world. There is no way in hell you thought you would continue to exploit, harm, and do the dirty on people and their ancestors would not protect them. There is a reason the most like very successful, abundant people rarely start fights and antagonize people, because they fundamentally know at a spiritual level, be careful on who you hurt, because you never know who's looking after them. And you will learn that lesson. And that's all I have to say about that. Now let's move on to the next slide, Hibiscuses. Let's just acknowledge the weight of ancestral karma, because that's exactly how this eclipse window opens up, because we kick off with a lunar eclipse, right? So as you know, the moon deeply affects the tides of many water sources all across our world, and a lunar eclipse will do the same to your emotions. The edgy side of that is with this particular lunar eclipse, it's going to make you confront the stuff that you really try to suppress or ignore. So for you cute hibiscuses, right, that definitely romanticize the past and relationships, and perhaps you give too much grace to people who are not graceful at all. Yeah, hibiscuses, you are not going to be able to keep up those illusions or talk that sweetness into your brain and your perception anymore. Like, you will get very clear insight, situations and experiences that make you acknowledge the stuff that you've been avoiding. Think of it like this, right? The eclipse is happening in Uttarabhadra. The ruling deity of Uttarabhadra is Anant Sher. Anant Sher is the king of the serpents. He himself comes from a family where they exude behaviors that are not great. He has a deep shame, a deep resentment, and he himself goes on a deep journey of transformation and penance. What I'm trying to get at is, whilst I am one to help people work through things, because that's my nature, right? I don't believe in giving up when it's tough. I don't believe when something doesn't make you, like, that's probably like very much my Punjabi side. But I'll be honest with you, I think in this eclipse, this will be the dominant experience. Sometimes, like Anand, we have to walk away. We have to pick our peace, and it's not gonna be easy, hibiscuses. I feel really bad making this video because I'm like, oh, like, sometimes we have experiences in life that will just wind us, that are really disappointing, that are really, really sad, and that's okay. Nothing can ever justify that. I don't think there's anything that's going to come out my mouth that's going to give you like real comfort when you're going through these things. But the one thing I would say is, perhaps in this experience of distancing and maybe endings, that's the thing that allows you to grow. That's the thing that stops you from being held back, being exploited, all of that. It's going to bring in some heavy ancestral karma. That's why I think everything that happens is happening during Pitru Paksha, because it's just an accumulation of cycles and behaviors that really like have to be addressed, but we're kind of forced to face it head on. But just like even the word force, it doesn't exactly give you a pep in a step. And the one thing I want to say is, right, it's not all bad, because if it's happening again in a nakshatra where the ruling deity could handle the weight of that situation. So if Anand can handle it, we can too, hibiscuses. We can too. It will be okay. But that's the lay of the land. That's what we're dealing with. Just like a lotus flower has to get through the muddiest water, so will we. This leads me to the other side of the eclipse, the solar eclipse, the light at the end of the tunnel. So ironically, the sun being eclipsed is talking about a very deep level of enlightenment. So think about it like this. The eclipse is happening in Hasta, a nakshatra that's associated with Surya, the sun god, right? The sign of enlightenment, the sign of healing, the sign of knowledge, the sign of basically becoming powerful. Hasta's power is whatever you're seeking, it will place it in your hands. So try to see the interconnections of Uttarabhadra into Hasta. You have to take the good with the bad. They can't be severed. And you know, I think it'd be a good time to kind of, do you know when you talk about ancestral karma, maybe try to see it like a tree. Just because you sever the branch doesn't mean the tree stops growing. And sometimes it's okay to do a little bit of DIY or medicinal farming on the tree so it doesn't rot and it has the chance to stand over centuries. There'll be something for you to achieve by that and the experiences that come up. And you've got to remember, Hasta is all about like sneakiness, like spies, espionage. So again, I think something about this energy and the things that you come to realize, everything in the shadows finally comes to light, but it really is your keys to good stuff. You're not I was gonna say you're not about to be in prison, but again, if you're Mojo Jojo, baby, it is the key to that lifetime sentencing. But just think of it as a moment where we are given ample opportunity to confront our truths, the good, the bad, the ugly, the crazy. And whilst it will feel, and it is very much a make or break moment for a lot of us, it's also the making of us hibiscuses. So try to keep that at the forefront during this very, very tumultuous time. Look, the energy of Hasta, again, is ultimately to bring things into our hands. So whether that's success, growth, or consequences, everything that occurs is due to past actions. And if you want to be super awooga about it, it could either be referencing the actions of the last 18 years or many lifetimes of behaviors. But either way, the consequences are quenching. So it's better to deal with it than to put your head in the sand, because you will not be rewarded for that behavior. So that's the lay of the land, hibiscuses, when it comes to these eclipses. Look, I know this time is deeply uncomfortable for all of us. You are having consistent waves of challenges and obstacles, and I feel like there's very little I can say that will bring you true comfort or make sense of the disappointments and the rage and the hurt that you are feeling. But if you can, I would like for you to keep one thing at the forefront of your mind until May 2025. All this chaos, all this hurt, all this confusion and letdown is ultimately giving you the keys to end up in a better place. And at the core of everything that's happening and will be happening for a few years yet to come, it's about realigning us to fulfill our dharma. We all have different responsibilities, we all have different purposes, but it would be a damn shame to keep you around people, environments, and mindsets and perceptions that do not give you the opportunity to at least attempt to fulfill that dharma. So yeah, maybe it looks at properly ending toxic behavior patterns that don't serve you. Maybe it is the shedding of bonds that you rather not go. And ultimately, it's about healing a lot of ancestral karma that has kept you caught up in God knows what with who knows who. But it's ending. And these eclipses are the tools that will allow the growth to happen. So no, it doesn't have to be comfortable. No, it doesn't have to feel, it doesn't even have to make sense. But the most important thing is you use this energy and whatever cards you get handed to build a winning hand. Ketu is the biggest bestower of treasures and abundance. It's in Hasta, a golden hand. Put together a winning hand. Try to think a little bit more deeper and grounded into the chaos. Other than that, I'm gonna love you.